All right, hey everyone, welcome to Softcast. This is your host, Sergeant Major Matt Parrish, and I'm honored to be joined with Vice Admiral Pybus and his wife, Miss Patti. Today we want to talk about ascension through the ranks and really the trials, the triumphs, and the tragedies of life, but of a career across special operations. And we're honored to be joined by the former Deputy Commander of USSOCOM, former Naval Special Warfare Commander, came up through the SEAL ranks. Sir, ma'am, thanks for joining us.
Sorry, Major, good to be here.
Good morning.
Excited to have the chance again. I'm always happy to have people in person so we can actually talk instead of being over Zoom. So I appreciate you all coming back into the headquarters to be able to do it. Sir, I guess I would like to start just, I'm always curious, like what makes a young man, as you're going through high school, as you're going into college, going through ROTC, what makes you ultimately say like the man in the green faces, Navy SEALs, that's where I want to go? Where in that process do you kind of get that itch?
Yeah, that's a great question, I guess. So for me personally, I come from military service. Right. My father in the Korean War, he was a naval officer forecasting weather over the peninsula for flyers. I've got a number of uncles, but one of my uncles was a career Army soldier. Okay. And in fact became the first sergeant major of the Army.
Wow.
So he was always an idol for me. Sure. But in the process, and I grew up somewhat in a rural environment, so I liked the outside and the woods and free space and those types of things. But when it came down to it in high school, I needed scholarship money for college, so I applied through an ROTC program, and the Navy offered me a scholarship. So I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I started, in ROTC, and then probably my sophomore year, I discovered that there was this Navy SEAL community. So I was attracted to that because it's a physical career, and so I was fortunate enough to get orders after I graduated and went to BUD/S, and there began a career in that. So and it was rewarding. It was because it was physical, and I wasn't particularly attracted to driving ships or submarines or flying planes, so it worked out. It worked out for me. But as you know, everybody's different.
Absolutely. So, that's one of the reasons I asked the question, because I think it's interesting that we get so many amazing people from so different backgrounds all across the country and all across the world, honestly, to come into special operations. So it's I'm always interested. Is it what makes you ultimately want to serve at all, in the nation, but then ultimately go into special operations. I'm curious, you later on in your career, commander of all of Naval Special Warfare, she had a pretty good lens on what BUD/S was when you were the commander. What's the juxtaposition between when you went to BUD/S back in the day? How do you look at that, having sort of the lens on the beach and then the lens looking down in charge of everything? Right.
Well, the constant there was how important that a session program is. I mean, the people that come through those programs and all the services in special operations, but coming in that crucible to get into the community, that's the filter. So it's extremely important how that's run and who comes in.
Yes, sir.
And so, as the commander of Naval Special Warfare, I reflected back on my own experience getting through BUD/S and how important that was. And so I paid attention to what was going on down there at the schoolhouse, as every commander really should. Sure. And not to be too intrusive, but you've got to be aware of that whole process, who's coming in, how many make it through, and be on top of those things and assist your subordinate commanders to get that done properly. So just that appreciation, I think, for how important that is. You can't lose sight of it. So it's and in fact, for us, for basic underwater demolition SEAL training, much of that process has not really been changed very much. The kids coming through it, they're different, you know. But the process itself has been pretty consistent, and so I didn't mess with the magic too much.
Yeah, that's good.
But the people running it, you have to, you know, supervise and make sure they're doing the right things.
And super important, as you said, sir. I mean, it's you know, we're blessed to have world-class assessment and selection programs across all of SOCOM.
Absolutely right.
But they're 100% necessary. You know, there's some, you know, things in the news occasionally, and unfortunately, we never want to lose anyone in training or in combat.
Right.
But occasionally it happens. But the difficulty of that training has to be maintained. You know, the first time you're under that level of stress and scrutiny can't be when, you know, bullets are flying for real.
No,
so I was expecting you to say you went to the last hard class, but that's okay.
Yeah, no, yeah. No, they still, you know, they still put out good product.
Yes, sir.
It's
absolutely.
It's good product, and it's got to change to some degree with the times, but. No, I'm in full agreement with what you just said, Sergeant Major. It's important, and they have to be challenged in those session programs. And but again, it's about the people supervising them. Right. You've got to have in place all your safety procedures, and so that's always got to be paid attention to.
I think you know, that's one of those things that gets lost a little bit. You know, those of us in the community know how much risk mitigation is around behind the scenes and how much medical support and all sorts of things. And, you know, people see just a snapshot or a small video of some of the training, and they don't realize from the Admiral, you know, up at NSW all the way down is doing everything they can to make it difficult, but to ensure that we, you know, have as many, you know, risk mitigation safety infrastructure in place to make sure you know, it's not flippant, I guess is what I would say. It's intentional.
If you ask my wife this question, she'll tell you, as a commander and you know, watching Hell Weeks, she was always...
Poor baby.
I was going to say, I want to hear. I will ask you that question. As you are then, you know, his right hand, and you go watch Hell Week.
I watched Hell Week one night, the start of Hell Week one night, and I could not stop crying.
Oh, man. Yeah.
You know, it was... And I wasn't even there. I was up on the balcony watching it, and it was that intense and that hard, and those poor kids.
Yeah. Well, and you know, I kind of, to me, it beats a patriotic drum in my heart as well that we're blessed to have people of that caliber and of that talent level that volunteer to go through that to earn the right to defend the nation, you know, at its most critical points. You know, I can remember when General Clark came in, sort of one of the first things he did, he and Greg Smith go out there and secure Hell Week, and there's this great picture of like this kid just covered in sand, you know, shaking the 4-star's hand. And it's like, man, how amazingly blessed are we as a nation that we have the best and brightest that are willing to go do it. So, sir, you start moving up in command roles. You're a SEAL now. You've got your trident. You're starting to move up. Can you talk to me about your sort of maturation as a leader and how you looked at things as you moved on, you know, to special mission units, to in different commands? You know, what would you say? How did your leadership philosophy sort of change and evolve as you kind of got that lens wider and wider?
Yeah. So. You know, it was always as a leader from the get-go, from buds into your first SEAL team. It's challenging. I mean, these kids are very bright. They kind of push the envelope, and so it's a difficult. You know, it's difficult for a leader. Yeah. You've really got to be on top of things and be hard, but. Again, for all the special operations, though, particularly as a younger guy, everybody's input is encouraged. You know, every troop is encouraged to offer suggestions on tactics and mission and what have you. So you have to listen, but then the leader's got to make decisions, and then you have to be firm in your decisions. So. I'll tell you, early on, it was not so much, you know, in survival mode, but it was somewhat like that. You know, every
it's
day
a Shark
was
Tank for
every
sure.
day was different. It's a Shark Tank. That's a good description. And so you learn. It's a lot. It's a lot of learning, but at the same time, you've got to make some decisions. And my first SEAL Team 2, Rudy Bosch, who's a legend in the community, was my Master Chief of the command, and he ruled with an iron fist, but he was a great role model. And they sent me on ship, very quickly as an ensign, gave me my trident, and sent me with a detached SEAL detachment on board ship, traditional Navy 6-month deployment, and we still had hostages in Iran, and so that whole thing was still going on. Very interesting time, and aboard ship. So I got a little bit of regular Navy flavor there for a while, but independent leadership. I learned a lot on that. Came back and had a platoon, and then went to the West Coast, and we still had underwater demolition teams. Before we did away with those, I was a UDT man. Yeah. And went to the Philippines, and then came back and went to a special mission unit. That's a place I wanted to go, and I was accepted to go. And the leadership challenge there was significant because you've got a larger organization. They have their own accession screening program for about 8 weeks. Got through that, and then they gave me a team. So. As a young guy there at a special mission unit, that was demanding.
Absolutely, yeah. Physically, mentally, leadership-wise, everything.
Every day, and it was really a challenge because there were many NCOs with a lot of team time and very challenging, but again, very, very good. I really enjoyed that tour.
I think that's as it was. That's one of those things to me is a common misconception. As I talk to people from outside, especially in like the business world and things like that, like people have this this perception of the military where it's like, oh well, you have positional authority, you're the commander, so everybody, it's easily to lead because it's like not in our units. Every shark in that tank. Is not going to go along with a bad idea easily.
No, you sink or swim, and I had followed a leader that was moved to another position. So in some degrees, probably not a. Yeah, it's just it was a difficult group, but I really enjoy them. I still stay in touch with those guys, but it was a challenging time, and in my tenure there, we had a couple of operations, and so and they went well enough, so survived that, and then at that point, I got married.
I was about to ask, Miss Patti, at what point right in here do you? Finally,
right at the end of that.
Right at the end of that, but then really at the beginning,
all the major commands.
Our first married tour, I was sent to Panama when we were dealing with Noriega. So, and that was unaccompanied, and she was pregnant, of course. And I got sent to Panama, and Patti is from Bolivia, so her family was in Bolivia. That she was going to go to Bolivia and deliver our baby there, and with her mother and father and all that. But so en route, she stopped in Panama to visit me and got stuck there during Operation Just Cause.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, as you kind of enter this picture, he's at a very high level. Did you have military in your family?
No.
Like, was this a complete new endeavor?
So my grandfather, Bolivian grandfather, was a prisoner of war during the Chaco War in South America, Paraguay against Bolivia. So he had, all I remember of him is him and his fellow prisoner of war buddies getting together and drinking a lot. So that was my only experience, having to deal with the aftermath of a hard military life. So I wasn't ever interested in a military guy. And I met his parents before I met him. I met his mom and dad and brother and sister. He was already in the Navy when I was going to college. And they had get together at their house, and I saw a picture of him, and I told my mother-in-law, that guy, I'm going to marry him one day.
Oh, wow.
So We started dating.
You didn't know you were getting hunted at that point.
No,
you thought you were doing the hunting.
No, that's right. I wasn't. Yeah. I was targeted. And this is in Oklahoma, at Oklahoma State University, where Patti was going to school there.
Yeah.
So then I married him, but I had no idea what a SEAL did.
Okay.
I had no idea. Back then, they didn't have movies, they didn't have books, they didn't have any of that stuff.
Right.
And it wasn't until that first Navy SEAL movie that came out in, I think, in 1990.
Yeah.
With
Charlie Sheen
and Michael Biehn. When we were watching the movie, I'm like turning to him, going, "Really? Is that what you do?"
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, you're like, oh, it's shot for shot. Perfect. Exactly. I just,
But we were already married. We already had a child.
Yeah.
There was no turning back.
Yeah. So how'd you feel when that initially, as you get married and he's unaccompanied to Panama, you're not used to this, like, did you feel like you had support structure? Did you feel like you're just flapping as you're traveling to Bolivia?
Not at all. I was brand new.
Yeah.
I was a brand new spouse.
Mm-hmm.
We were in San Diego at the time, and then he's just, bye-bye, I got to go.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was so unfair.
Yeah.
It was not what I had signed up for.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, how can they do this to us?
Right, yeah.
Send him unaccompanied for a whole 2 years.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I always told the spouses.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Navy is their first wife.
Yeah.
You're just a second wife.
Yeah.
And as long as you keep the relationship with the other wife up, then you'll be fine.
Yeah.
If you start going in between his brothers and him, your marriage is probably going to suffer too.
Yeah, it's definitely a shock. For my wife, we got married in between two combat tours, right? And it was like back to back, Afghanistan, Iraq. And in the middle, I had a 4-day. I was in a school, I had a 4-day, got married, and then I'm right back gone again. And it's like, I just think back now of like, as a guy who helps run some of those programs, I'm like, golly, the situation I put her in of just like, all right, hey, love you. All right, I'm back out, and it's just the way it goes.
Yeah,
but,
and it's hard for you to understand that he does love you.
Oh yeah, 100%.
It's hard, that you have to compete with somebody else, and that somebody is not even a person. Yeah, it's a whole bunch of people in the country. So
the other thing I think is interesting, and I'm curious if you felt the same way. It's different if the other wife, so to speak, the other career is just like a normal business, like making money or whatever endeavor. When it's something with such a deep purpose and meaning and patriotism and everything, it's almost like you can't even question it at all because it's such a honor.
You're a traitor.
Yeah, exactly.
You're a traitor if you question it.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's unfortunate because we can always lean back on like, honey, the nation.
I gotta go. I don't know when I'm coming back. Like, I can't call you. I can't write to you.
Uncle Sam's asking. It's not Wall Street that's asking. Like, I've got a very noble pursuit, and how can you question it?
By the way, you need to tell your friends that everything is fine and I'm still home.
Yeah, yeah. I want as you were in that sort of space, how did you find after that trip? You get stuck in Panama. And obviously, if there's something there that you think is, crazy, because that's a pretty wild story to get stuck in Panama during Just Cause. But as you start to get integrated into it, you later, as you said, helped sort of run some of these spouse programs. How did you try to draw on that experience, to kind of help the young wives?
When we were in Panama, the wives there took care of me. He was gone.
Awesome. Yeah.
All of the husbands disappeared, and there's this poor young wife who's 7 months pregnant, and I went into premature labor. And so they rallied from everywhere. The plan was to go to Bolivia and have the baby, and obviously after premature labor they wouldn't let me leave. So all of a sudden I had cribs and car seats and little baby clothes, and people were making sure that I was fine, was being visited by spouses all the time. So that was a very good school to start. I had never felt just the being part of a family like that, so far away from my own family and so alone, with a husband that left for days, and I was in the middle of an emergency, and then these wives just came out of the woodwork. people I barely knew.
Sure.
I had just gotten there a few days before, so I didn't know any of them well. They weren't my friends, yet they still treated me like a part of the family. It was eye-opening and very well. We were very grateful for that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
yeah, it was good. I mean, the Navy gave us a small house, and so my first child was delivered at the end of Just Cause there in Panama. So
yeah, that's amazing. I mean, it's a testament to sort of that coming together, community of the military spouse. That's awesome. Yeah, as you I guess most folks that end up in the position that you ended up in as 3-star admiral, commander of all these different places, almost universally when I ask them, like, did you ever think that would be possible? It's almost never. But I'm curious, like, did you ever, or at what point as you're sort of in that 06 role and it's like, oh, I'm going to start going into the flag officer realm, how did you view that transition, and then how did it end up working out for you as you sort of go to that strategic leadership kind of level?
Yeah, I tell you, I've always been very appreciative of just being in the community, and I took my jobs very importantly. I wasn't looking at the stars ever. What's my next job? I did want to be in. I wanted to be in units that were good and going forward, and so I found myself in these special mission units. After Panama, I went to another special unit staff at Fort Bragg, and spent almost 3 years there. From Panama. So Patti was all new to this, and we first show up to an Army base at Fort Bragg. And
I had just learned all of the ranks in the Navy. And then all of a sudden I had to learn everybody else's.
And I was a lieutenant. But the Army thought I was like a new guy. Right. So we had to work through housing. I'm a Navy lieutenant. I'm an 03. So all that thing. But again, I would disappear for days, and I couldn't really tell her where I was. But we kind of worked out some code words that, hey, I'm not coming home for a while.
Right.
And I know the answer to that question though.
Yeah.
When my husband has broken service, he got out for a few years and then went back in.
Right.
So when we were in Panama, he was a lieutenant, and he once said, if I make it to lieutenant commander, the Navy will let me stay in for 20 years, and then I can retire and still have a retirement pension. Yeah. So that was the goal, lieutenant commander.
100%. And then rapidly ended up all of a sudden, hey, I'm past that.
I was given great opportunities,
absolutely.
And so I've always been very grateful for that. So this. As I became more senior, I was a Commodore on the West Coast, in charge of the West Coast SEAL teams. Was captain, Navy captain rank, and I had done I was the the human resources officer for a couple of years, writing all the SEAL officer orders, so I knew kind of how things worked, promotion boards and what have you. So. I suspected I was probably competitive for flag rank, and I was selected, fortunately, and just got excited to do just work at a different level, and very excited to work in a joint environment with all of the community, the entire enterprise. And my first assignment was here at USSOCOM, working for first General Brown and then Admiral Olson. And I just always enjoyed it.
I was shocked. I had been promised that when we got to Tampa the first time in 2002, that this was going to be our retirement home. My kids were going to be able to go to the same high school. They weren't going to have to move anymore. I was promised that. Obviously, it didn't happen.
I've heard that from a few people.
I'm reminded of many promises broken, by my wife.
They were made with best intentions.
They shouldn't have been made if you couldn't be able
My wife says similar things. Yeah, she's like, every time I get a new job, I'm like, honey, she's like, why do you keep telling me this? This is like, this is not going to be what you think it's going to be. You're going to find other things to do, and it is what it is. We're trying our best.
But that's so. But I go back. I mean, and having done that human resources bit for our community, I'm well aware that there are very talented men and women in the enterprise at every rank.
Sure. Yeah.
And they're, obviously they don't all make flag officer if they're an officer, know.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean they're any less talented than you, or there's just
there's timing. There's all kinds of different
things. So 100%. Many examples of great people that for whatever reason, and that's not the goal. Shouldn't be the goal.
Yeah.
But
I think making an impact at each level is just sort of what you said. I think that's really the real goal. I'm curious, as the POTFF senior enlisted guy, right? You were here during the time of sort of the establishment of that, and then you were very critical as an advocate for it later on as you came back as a deputy commander. What's been your lens on sort of how we humans over hardware take care of our people, all of those things through your career?
Well, I tell you, I didn't. So you, as a younger guy, you just roll. You just do your job, and you don't pay too much attention to the effects or issues. But in the early days after 9/11, the forces are going really hard.
Yeah.
And I'm already at senior 05 and then young captain rank, so I'm not on the battlefield. But I'm force providing, and then I'm receiving back, and then they're I've got positions where I'm responsible for families.
Right.
And beginning to hear, hey, we're really the pace of war is really aggressive.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the guys aren't spending any time at home, and things are beginning to be really stressed.
Absolutely.
And at some point, Admiral Olson makes the comment that the force is stressed, is being
fraying,
stressed.
Fraying around the edges. Yep.
Yeah. And so I've always considered myself a good listening piece and advocate for the family, the home front, as well as the troop. And so when I go into take naval special warfare, there's some real issues.
Yeah.
Length of deployments and trying to figure all that out, and there's no turnaround time, and there's a lot of problems on the home front.
Sure.
With injury, guys self-medicating, just the whole thing.
Yep.
And so that's when POTFF really, for Naval Special Warfare, we put in place an infrastructure, and we're talking with each other services to compare notes to how we're going to do that. Yeah. But we did put in place in Naval Special Warfare this, assigned a leadership and a staff to this mission of taking care of the force and the families, if you will, and SOCOM was providing resource and then replicating at their level this larger organization, which became POTFF. And we spent significant time, both my wife and I, addressing this, talking to our own families and trying to provide resources in the right ways. And was really proud of what our community did, and then I saw the same thing being replicated throughout the force.
Absolutely.
And then Admiral McCraven came in and really, really gave it formal resourcing at a very high level to really cement it. And, but you could really tell across the force that it did make a difference pretty quickly.
And it's not a silver bullet. It's always it's going to be contingent on how well it's implemented at every place and how much people there's some personal responsibility to get into some of those programs that we're not going to make them mandatory.
But on the operations front too. I mean, the enterprise had to redial their pace.
Yeah.
So it had to be. It was. You got to take care of the family, but you also got to take care of the driving force for these problems.
Yeah.
And so that was done, and that's when Admiral McCraven, put he mandated a particular amount of time only for deployment, and then time back at home base. So
yeah, absolutely. Miss Patti, I'm curious, in that same time, is he saying, you all were talking to all these families, like what was your lens on sort of that evolution between seeing some of those fraying around the edges things and trying to help implement this new program that tries to address it?
So early on, way before all of this, my theory about how to be part of our team, Team Pybus, was I do as much as I can to alleviate whatever troubles he might have in command. And that took me to making sure that the spouses were okay and the families were okay. So I always, every time he's been in command, have tried to facilitate networking and so that they can either have each other or have me to help them out. So when all of this was happening, I saw firsthand how some spouses were kind of getting lost.
Sure.
SEALs sometimes tell their spouses that they should not socialize with other SEAL spouses because it might impact their careers. And then we had our first deaths. This is back in 2005-ish, 4 or 5. And spouses all of a sudden saw the need to know each other and to
be able to rally around like they did for you in Panama.
For other spouses. And I think that was the first time that I saw this whole thing coming together. It was in a major death, I think it was 2005, honey, wasn't it?
Red Wings?
Yeah, Red Wings. Right. And that was the beginning. When a lot of us realized that without each other, we wouldn't be able to survive. So it started a grassroots effort first. We did it all, provided consolation food, facilitated, babysitting, the whole thing. And then a few years later, our POTUF took care of.
Started to become more formalized.
We called it FFRG.
Sure,
So,
it's had a lot of evolutions, it's certainly
it's
not.
It's different than the FRG that the Army has, but it was our family support. And so they started kicking in, and as a senior spouse, we had a team that more or less advised and was in there to help too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, sir, as you get to sort of your pinnacle as your final job here back in this headquarters, your deputy commander, 3-star Vice Admiral, what do you remember as being, kind of your driving factor and really the things that you are pushing hard for as sort of the CG's right hand here at USSOCOM at the time?
Yeah, well, it was my third tour of duty at USSOCOM, and all within the operations realm, and much of that kind of in Black Ops, what they now call sensitive activities, was much of my work here. That continued as the deputy. And because the deputy sits on all those councils and ops updates and makes decisions for the CG. And so that's where I, as the deputy commander, I continued to spend a lot of time in that realm. And it continues. General Clark made that a priority to do those types of things properly and effectively. But otherwise, you're just trying to take a load off the CG on other things. Track POTUF pretty carefully and tried to contribute where it made sense for the deputy commander to make sure that organization got priority and resourcing properly. Not to be intrusive into the component, that's component business. But if they need help, you absolutely want to help them out and pay attention to it. much like our accession programs, maintaining your force and family is extremely important. So, again, just tried to be a good advocate and supporter of what the components were trying to get accomplished.
Yeah, absolutely.
And still fighting that pace of operations.
Yeah.
And so I absolutely enjoyed my time here, first for General Votel and then General Thomas as their deputy. So
as you get to the end of your career, after decades and decades of service, you transition from Navy SEAL commander to all right, I'm going to be veteran, father, husband, all these things. Right. How did you feel entering that transition? Where you've dedicated the entirety of your adult life.
Everybody's time comes.
Yeah,
and again, reflecting back to my HR tour, my detailing tour, and people have to give it up and make room for those that are coming up. Right. And that was my conversation with General Votel. I said, hey. Coming up on 2 years, I know there are other people that you probably want to roll in, and whose time has come, and so, I made the decision to go after my 2-year time and bring somebody else in, and I began to solicit, from my peers how they transitioned and get advice, and so
Regardless, though, of all the advice you get.
Yeah,
it is difficult.
Sure.
Yeah.
I wasn't in the military, and it's still.
Yeah, it's transition for you too.
Yeah, a big change. Yeah. You're just another civilian.
Yeah.
And you see it firsthand how it hurts.
Yeah.
Because that's the word. It hurts to leave something you love.
Absolutely, especially as like we sort of talked about earlier, is like because I'm in that process now, right? It's like as the noble calling of, what you always had mission, mission, purpose, all these things for, as that sunsets, you're like, I've always had this thing where I didn't have to think about what I was hanging my hat on as far as purpose and mission. It's like ready-made given to you.
It's your identity. It's who you are.
100%. Yeah, they tell you not to hang on to that. Yeah, but it is. I mean, you've got so much time into it. It is in your bloodstream. So, then you have to pursue something else that becomes your driver. I was fortunate that the SEAL community, we have there are a number of benevolence, but our largest benevolent, the Navy SEAL Foundation, quickly offered me a chairmanship of their board. And that's a great mission to continue to support that community, and so that's.
Yeah, it gives purpose.
I get it. I got the mission. It gives me mission. I'm full. I'm all into it. Yeah. So that was one driver that helped me transition.
Yeah.
I don't miss the work. I mean, I do, but I miss the people most of all.
Yeah.
People like Stacy and seeing coming in every day. I just miss coming in every day and seeing people.
Absolutely. No, I completely understand.
And I love having breakfast with my husband every day.
Yeah. No, it's great. Well, we've got mountaintop moments of coming through our career. You guys help build some of these programs to help with families and resilience and all these things. But we also have valleys, right? And unfortunately for you all, tragic valley that no one wishes as a parent. And I first thank you for even being willing to come in and talk about this. But we know ultimately our goal is to try to help anyone else from feeling the same pain. So, can you talk to us about sort of the situation with the unfortunate tragic loss of your son and how you all approached that after years of rallying around others, how that affected you all?
Yeah. Go ahead.
So we have 4 children.
Yes, ma'am.
They all moved around many times with us. They ended up going to 9 and 10 different schools each.
Yeah.
All 4 of them went to 3 different high schools in multiple countries. The baby, Christopher, who by all measurements was the most socially adapted kid.
Yeah.
Extremely smart, able to make thousands of friends everywhere and keep those friendships, whereas the other ones might have just made friends for whenever they were in California, but then as soon as they went to a new place, they made new friends. Christopher was one of the ones that kept all of those friendships alive. Yeah. And we still don't understand what was going through his head.
Yeah.
We have theories. Maybe COVID lockdowns had something to do with it. Yeah. He had recently changed a job, going to work for a startup company after working for a very awesome company to work for, Apple.
Yeah, yeah.
And so maybe the stress of the new job, we just don't know. He was drinking, apparently a little bit more than normal.
Yeah.
And had told a couple of his friends that he was having panic attacks. And I don't know if that was also another contributing factor, but it shocked us.
Of course. Yeah.
He was the one that we never expected it from.
Yeah.
And it's been very hard to accept without understanding.
100%, yeah. And I know, I unfortunately didn't get the chance to meet Christopher, but I've talked to Stacy and others, and they just rave about, his intelligence, he had graduated, top university, had a great job at Apple and all these things. And it's, we've all lost friends similarly to suicide that you never see coming, right?
No.
Yeah, no, he was 25.
Right.
And, he had graduated from Rensselaer Polytechnic with a computer degree.
Yeah.
And while going to college, he had worked for an Apple shop in Albany, and then got offered a job at Apple headquarters in Cupertino.
Yeah.
Right on graduation, paid well, and
everybody wants to work there. Like you said, great company. Everybody wants to go to. Yeah.
And during college, he did join a fraternity, and he held every position to include president when he was a senior. Yeah. As a senior. So he had, as Patti said, he had tons of friends. Then a great job. He went to San Francisco. He loved San Francisco, and So the point there was he seemed to have everything. Now I know when he was with us in high school, particularly, he compartmented some small part of his life.
Yeah.
You and I compartment things. I mean, so I'm kind of used to that.
Yeah.
I didn't see it. I didn't feel it was any big deal.
Yeah.
And then we lost him. It was a big shock. So the point there is, I think anybody can make that kind of decision. I think, and just we just didn't see warning signs.
Yeah.
So you go through all of the weeks and the months leading to it, trying to figure out, could I have done something?
Sure.
Could I have said something?
Right.
Did something I did when he was growing up caused him to feel or to have this idea?
Yeah.
And it's like a never-ending,
of course,
process of trying to figure out what it is, to the point where you for weeks just give it up and say, no, I'm not going to think about this anymore. But then something happens that you start thinking about it again and thinking, if I solve it for this case, maybe I can also avoid somebody else in the future, whether it's another one of my kids or somebody else's kid. If I'm able to determine what it is that causes or that caused this.
Yeah.
But you'll never know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I, here again during my several tours here at USSOCOM, suicide has been a problem for the enterprise.
Absolutely.
For our troops, and we've all taken time to bring in experts and be counseled on what warning signs to look for your brothers and sisters in the force, and that's all well and good, and I think that should continue. But we we still stay in touch with Chris's friends who didn't see any warning signs. They were as shocked as we were that he made that decision.
Yeah.
So it's a very difficult challenge.
Absolutely. And that's why, hopefully as we have this conversation, our listeners and other folks in the force know, a lot of times if we say suicide prevention training or any of those things, it becomes, oh yeah, here we go, I got another click the box, whatever.
Right.
And it can become rote and familiar and all those things. And, I think we within our force have an epidemic of people who will give their shirt off their back to anyone but won't ask for help. And so we sometimes think of these signs and symptoms and all these precursors as like it's going to be these flashing red lights. But almost every one of my friends that I've lost to suicide has been someone that I would have never in a million years thought. It didn't seem like, it is incongruent with sort of when you're sitting in that check the blocks, training of like, here's all the signs. And yes, ma'am, I mean, I've done the same thing with my friends, right? You run through, like, what could I have done differently? Yeah. I mean, no parent, there's nothing worse as a parent than the loss of a child at all, whether it's, a car accident or whatever, but to have that, thought process of trying to figure it out, sometimes it's incomprehensible how people could get to the point where they have a hopeless outlook when it seems like from the outside
he had it all. He had it all. So you said something that, the Christopher was like that too.
Yeah,
the number of friends that have come and said how he would drop everything and go help somebody else or give you his last whatever.
100%.
And it is hard to see that same person who was so good to so many not be good to himself.
Yeah, absolutely.
He did not think enough of himself. Everybody else was more important than himself. I that's how I feel. The injustice of him not being able to see how many people loved him and how many people cared for him, and thinking that he was alone in the last few minutes of his life.
Yeah, we've all unfortunately gone to memorial services where you're like, if this person could see the amount of love and outpouring from everyone that they had touched, that it's unfortunate that in those valleys, in that darkest hour, we can get to a point that hope for the future is not there. But if we can just make it through that sort of bit of a valley, like to see so many other people that at a minute would have driven to where he was or answered the phone or all those things. But in that moment of the darkest, you don't see it. And what I hope is that people listening realize that this is not just a discussion or an episode for you to be looking at it in others. It's to realize that this type of thing can happen to all of us, including myself, to anyone.
That's what I would... I know, like the suicide prevention training kind of focuses on your teammates to look for signs. But, if I could tell my son, who went through this, how much it hurts your family, your friends. I mean, it ripples through with pain. So that personal decision really hurts a lot of people. A lot of people. If you could somehow step out and see that, you might reconsider what you're doing. So for people that might be contemplating it, they need to appreciate how painful it is, and it.
Suicide doesn't end pain.
It
really
multiplies it. It's not even that it transfers the same amount of pain.
You might think it's just your decision. Hey, it's my decision, and I want to remove myself, and but there's just no way you can keep it from not impacting all these people, and it's many, many more than you would think. And it's a deeper hurt than you might think. I mean, and it could just continue. So if you could somehow, make sure that people appreciate how much a decision like that ripples through families and friends, they might reconsider.
It's a transformational pain.
Absolutely,
it makes you into a different person.
Yeah, there's a before that and an after that, 100%.
Yes,
I think, as we talk about suicide prevention, in our own community where we have all these barrel-chested freedom fighters and the most valorous and brave folks anywhere, I am absolutely unconcerned with whether someone will answer the phone or drive to their brother or sister. I'm unconcerned with that.
Right.
Our selfless folks across the enterprise will bend over backwards. What I need them to do is to have the courage to call somebody. They have the bravery to pick it up and go, I need the bravery. We need the bravery to be willing to call someone.
That's a good way to put it, Sergeant Major. Yeah.
In all of the grieving, of friends that I've lost from suicide, it never gets any easier, and there is that before and after. And I know that you all, it has only been a year. I mean, we're just beginning the after, and I can't thank you guys enough for being willing to come and talk about it and to try to have a discussion that breaks through this. If I go right now and I pull some people into a room and say, we're going to talk suicide prevention, people's eyes roll so far in the back of their head that they come back out the other side. And it's like, hey, I'm not just talking about you seeing it in some mythical person that you're imagining right now. I need you to think about the fact that you, who's listening, you could get to the point in the valley where you don't see hope. And I need you to know that there always will be hope. And, sir, I appreciate your message to your son. Miss Patti, if if somebody's listening to this right now.
My message is a little different. It comes from a mother.
Yeah.
I would like everyone to always to not waste the opportunity to tell people how important they are to them, to yourself. I think that if somebody who's having these ideas, whether you know it or not, will benefit by hearing from someone how important they are in their lives.
Yeah.
Whether it's a friend or relative or a son or a dad.
Yeah.
If Christopher, I think if he had known how important he was to people, he might have thought twice. He might have pulled back.
Yeah, I think I hope if you're listening to this, check on your strong friends, right?
Yeah,
that's what sometimes
but even everyone. Everyone.
That's what I mean, though. Not just those.
I love you, man.
Everyone.
I love you. You're important to me.
Right.
It doesn't matter what the relationship is. Just tell those who are important in your life that they matter, that they're important in your life, and that you appreciate them.
Yeah. No matter how bleak the situation seems, there is hope on the other side of it.
Yeah.
We need you to be willing to call someone. If you're listening to this right now, there is a ton more people than you think of that will pick that call up and help you in a heartbeat, that will be standing at your memorial, that your pain is now multiplied and splashed out. I guess, as you go forward, how do you hope to continue to honor his legacy in the future?
We started, as you know, Christopher went to 3 different high schools.
Yeah.
So we started a STEM memorial scholarship in each of those schools.
That's great.
And so that way his name will still be mentioned in the 3 high schools that he went to. So kids compete for this scholarship.
Yeah.
The schools choose, but we provide the funds for the scholarship. Each of the schools chooses who's going to get it, but it's someone who might have the same interests as Christopher. Someone with computer savvy, leadership positions, maybe JROTC, since Christopher was in JROTC, and So this past year in May, June, we awarded the first scholarships at those schools.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and talking with you today honors him.
Absolutely,
well.
100%.
We, I know my son. He had an issue that he thought was, he couldn't reconcile it, and thought he would just make a decision as a young man and take care of his own business, right? But it's everybody's wired into this larger network,
right.
And so it's not just your decision alone. I mean, unfortunately, and so that's my message to people. You're just wired in, and to take a decision like that, to remove yourself, you might think it's your own. It's just me, and I'm not married, and I'm just going to make this decision. It's just me. It's not just you.
Yeah, the ripple in the pond is further than you'd ever see.
It's significant, and if people could understand that before taking a decision like that, they might change their minds.
Yeah. Well, I can't thank you guys enough for having the bravery and courage to honor his legacy by coming on and talking about this. I hope, to me, the way that has always punched through that monotony of the day-to-day is to hear real human stories. And, I can't thank you both enough for being willing to come on and share this one. I have no doubt that you all will continue to lead in this area and honoring his legacy. And again, I can't thank you both. Obviously, on behalf of General Fenton and all of us at SOCOM, thanks for coming out here. But personally, thank you guys for being willing to add your voices. Yeah.
Thanks.
It's been a privilege.
Yeah. So for all of you out there, thank you for listening to another episode of Softcast. And if you are feeling any of this, obviously we have a nationwide hotline, 988 for veteran suicide. There are a number of hotlines. You all, if you're in our formation, I hope you're already aware of the resources that you have in your circle. But if you're not aware of the POTF resources, the resources that you have from the installation, whatever that may be, go and find them out. Go take a look. We'll post some of them here in the link for this podcast, but each and every one of your individual networks, I want you to go look at it so that you can send a friend that way if you see these signs. But I want you to remember what we talked about, in that this is to make you realize that it could be you and that you need to make the call. So on behalf of us all here at USSOCOM, thanks for listening to another episode of Softcast.